welcome. I'm Cynthia Corsetti, executive coach, author, and speaker based in Sewickley, Pennsylvania. With years of experience in guiding leaders to realize their full potential, I've embarked on a new journey to bring those insights to a wider audience. Care to Lead, a podcast dedicated to diving deep into the world of leadership. In each 30-minute episode, I sit down with inspiring individuals from diverse backgrounds to explore pivotal moments in their leadership journeys, the challenges they face in today's ever-evolving business landscape, and the legacy they aspire to leave behind. Together, we uncover valuable lessons and insights that can empower each one of us to lead with purpose, compassion, and resilience. So whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey, join me as we discover what it truly means to care to lead. Today, we are joined by Malika Begin, who is a people and organizational development leader and the founder of Begin Development. It's a business and consulting firm that works with companies to build strong, healthy cultures. Built with over a decade of experience in the people development space, Malika's signature style and dedication to team health are powered by her belief that leaders who invest in their employees, excel in conflict and communication skills, and foster collaborative teams are the biggest assets to a successful organization. It sounds like this woman speaks my language. So welcome, Malika.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. These are all my favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, me too. So this should be a great conversation. You were part of my Authority Magazine series on effective succession planning. So let's begin by, I'm curious why you felt that succession planning was a topic you wanted to shine a light on.
You know, that's interesting. I haven't really positioned myself as a succession planning expert, but what has come out of so much of the coaching that I'm doing, and especially the leadership development programs that we've been running, is succession planning. We keep getting asked about that. We keep talking about it. I just got off the phone with a team member this morning, and we were talking about our highest and best value and some of the things that we're being brought in to do. And oftentimes we come in for crisis management or to build a program where not one hasn't existed before, or during a merger and acquisition or right after it, to really help figure out what's the game plan for the people landscape. What are the development programs? What are the teams? And the what are the teams questions, the most surprising to us, because what happens is when we interview them, they have clear teams, the executive team, the SVP team, the VP team. And when we get into it and we start doing development that's specific with coaching and a group of people coming together on a regular basis, it always shifts right at the last minute. Who's on this team? Who's on that team? Maybe we need a different team. Maybe this team's too big. And when we get together, we do a smaller team. And so just watching some of our highest and best value being helping companies to figure out who is on which team, and are the teams clear, and do people understand what it means to be on a leadership team and what leadership team they're on and what expectations or problem solving that team is doing. And that usually is over like a 6 to 12 month evolution. It's not something that we figure out before we start all the time, but you see people sort of cement together and grow in that team development. And then the next conversation is naturally about succession planning.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you're like me and our teams, when we go into organizations, we find that some of these CEOs are phenomenal leaders. And so they assume that because they're really great leaders, that everything's just going to flow down, but it doesn't. You need 100 people under you who also have excellent leadership skills. And I think that's where the succession planning, that's where the breakdown often is, because leadership skills aren't just innate. They need to be taught. And that's where we kind of miss the boat, I think. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely. And some leaders are just naturally gifted teachers. So you see in pockets of the company, wow, this team not only admires their leader and they're high performing, but they're taking on more rapidly. They're like an acceleration team within the organization. And then we say, why is that leader so good at teaching those skills or giving them more opportunities or bringing them into more meetings? Like they're naturally mentoring them in a way, not just having them deliver for the team and delegating to them. And so we start to say, okay, how can we do that on every team? What does that look like? Whether it's a manager's strength or not, to build that into our culture. And that's where some of the leadership development programs, and they're not right for every program, or every company, but when they say this is part of our strategy and we need to build this in, then you start to see like, okay, there's a push for a mentorship component, a coaching component, exposure to different parts of the organization. And then when you start seeing that, you're like, okay, there's some natural succession planning going because they're having more visibility. They actually might have an internal pool to pull from, where before they always went external.
And it is frustrating to see organizations going external and being in that position. A lot of times when we're called in, we find the same thing. They've been going external, and the goal is to keep it internal, because it's so much better to keep the talent you have and keep developing them than
absolutely. Would you rather, would you rather spend the money on the development and succession planning, or would you rather spend the money with a recruiting firm and a lengthy interview process, and then the time it takes to onboard them and get them with their relationships in the organization that can be shorthand for the people who are already there?
And in 6 months, are they still the right person, right? They're all great when you're dating, but once you're married to them, it's a whole different story. So today, obviously, things are changing in the business environment. We've got, remote workers and we've got in-office workers. We've got a lot of different things. What challenges have you recently faced, or organizations that you've worked for faced, and how did you adapt or overcome them?
You mean specific to the succession planning?
No, just in general, in leadership.
I think getting people together is the most important thing. And I think with the organizations I'm working with, just the calendar, getting it on the calendar, like having a 12-month build or even a 6-month build where you can say to people, we're getting together twice a year, and then here's all the other things around it. Or we're getting together quarterly, or with a lot of my executive teams, we're getting together once a month. That is a lot to ask of an executive team who's flying internationally constantly for all of, the big deals and the things that they're working on. And so when I come in and say, okay, for the first 6 months, we really need to be in person once a month. We can't let this work lag. You want to see results. It needs to be accelerated. How do we get these 15, 10, 8 leaders in a room in the same place in the world for a 2 to 3 day thing? Like, that's a lot to ask. And we get to keep doing it because people are seeing the results of it. And the consistency, I think, is the key there. Even if you just commit to 2 or 3 months, you see such rapid growth because you've been intentional about bringing people together. You have a clear design on your outcomes that you need. And you say, we've been talking about this for years, but now we're actually going to do it. And we're going to do it with good results so that we can say, we did it. And now we can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I find the same thing. I use Marco Polo a lot with my executive clients so that we can have these video chats. And it's like not uncommon at all to have an executive sitting in an airport in, anywhere in the world, leaving me Marco Polos because the time differences and when we can chat. So you have to be really adaptable, and it is important to get them together in person as often as you can.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many challenges to list. That's the first one that comes to mind. And the other one is we're talking that no matter how clear an organization I work with is on their mission, vision, values, it feels like there's always work that we end up doing during the process to come back to how does it trickle down? How does this look with the strategy? What does this look with our resources? And so I do think one of the biggest challenges is really incorporating mission, vision, and values so that they are part of the organization and not just a tagline on the wall or a good idea in the website. If I walk around an organization, my first day there, I just ask them, like, what's the vision here? What's the goal? Like, what are you all trying to accomplish together? And I know it's a pretty strong organization when everyone can repeat it to me. Oh, this is what we're doing. We are all on the same page. More often than not, people are like, I don't know. I think the marketing team put out this new thing last year. I'm not quite sure. I'm in sales. And it's like, okay, there might be some work to do to bring people around the clear vision that we're all working toward.
So I love that. And what I've also found, even an executive team, if you're in a room with the senior executives of the organization and you talk about the mission, vision, and values of the organization, each one of them hear that. And each one of them assign meaning to what that means. And then as they leave and disseminate that down, are we all looking at the same thing in the same way? Does it mean the same thing? Are we going through what does this mission mean to us, and how do we want to incorporate that into our organization? And it has to start there, of them all being on the same page and then moving it down.
100%. I'm so curious, Cynthia, what you do with your executive teams to get that clarity and buy-in around the vision when it hits that point. Because you're exactly right. People have their own interpretation of what it means. I've heard something like it has to be said 30 times or, some crazy number, 25 times, 26 and a half times before people really start to internalize it. And the idea there being like, oh, I feel like I'm talking about it all the time as the CEO. But if my people don't, they're like, oh, they don't really talk about it that much. It's such a disconnect.
Well, we focused on that a lot because what I found very early on, and of course, my thing is all care to lead, right? The first word is clarity and care. The C stands for clarity. And the reason is because I found out very quickly that it's like, have you ever been, here's a way to describe it. Have you ever done panel interviews where 7 of you are interviewing a candidate? And we all have the same interview. We all ask the same questions. And then the candidate leaves and you look at each other and you saw completely different things. It's like, were we talking to the same person? Like, you think they're like a complete loser, not a good fit. This one thinks they're phenomenal, best thing they've ever seen. And we all talk to the same person. So if you roll that out into like mission, vision, and values of an organization, each one brings their own perspective and their own lens to what these words mean. So if you can get that executive team right from day one to really talk about it, like peel it apart. What does it mean to you? Sometimes we do reflection, like just write it down. Just write down what you think this means. And then we share what they wrote. So it's not like, oh yeah, what she said. So it's really a great exercise that, you might love with your executive teams, because you'd be surprised how different it is. And then you wonder why, like 5 layers down, it's different. It's like kids playing the telephone game.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be in a room to do some of that work, don't you? Like, I love hybrid and the way that we're able to work together, especially post-COVID. But for some of that work, you really do have to be in person.
Yeah, I think it sounds, listening to you, very much like you do, very similar to what we do. It's like some in person, some like, but always trying to get the teams together. And so I want to ask you this: how do you help your organizations foster a culture of open communication and trust within their teams?
Yeah, I think you have to have an intentional design and a plan around what that means for the team. There are so many good resources out there. We use a lot of Patrick Lencioni with Table Group, like 5 dysfunctions or 5 behaviors of a team. We use DISC. We use, sometimes we're requested to bring in things like SDI. So we often start with something like that. But before we do anything like that, we interview everybody on the team. That's really the key, to not say, this worked over here, I think it'll work for you, but to have a lot of data that's very individualized from each of those team members, and to get it from them one-on-one, not consensus with the room, but to hear what's really going on in the team. What are you experiencing? How are you seeing your leadership? What's the leaders? How are you experiencing others in their leadership roles? Like, is it a high functioning team? And once you get all that data, you can start to say, okay, this team does not need a leadership development program. They actually just need some time together around the strategy and who's doing what, and knowing that even if their department is flourishing, it doesn't matter, because the whole company is not seeing that increase in revenue or the results that they're pushing toward. So I think a lot of the work we end up doing initially is about teaming, about everybody feeling like their first team actually is the executive team. And that's not often the case, because if I'm in product and I've hired all my people and I've worked with them for 20 years and I got thrown into this executive team with these 8 people, and maybe I've worked with 1 or 2 before, I have alliances, I have history, I've built relationships with some, but not others. So you have to go back to the work to do that, back to the baseline of foundation for that team of trust. Do you all trust each other? Do you consider each other your first team, or is your first team the team you're managing? And often just that reframe and shift of who's your first team, that can take a couple months. That can be a lot of like work and conflict management. Conflict comes out in that process. It needs to be done. Healthy conflict is so important for a team being able to get to that level. But I think it has to be very tailored, very individualized, and very reactive to what's happening on the team right now and how the team got formed. Like, maybe it's right after a merger and acquisition, and there's some big things that need to be on the table. And I think it's hard for internal people to do that. It's much easier for an external person like me to come in and be like, how can we get this on the table in a way that feels safe and organic and isn't just like, we're going to deal with all the problems right now?
I totally hear you. We do the same thing with the team one. One of the things that I've done with executive teams also is if we're in a group setting and we're going through some things, I will ask them, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to answer it first as team one, and then secondly as the product team lead, and that really helps them put on two different hats in their answer, and then that helps that reframe sometime, and I enjoy doing that.
So
So,
powerful. Wow.
what is one of your favorite questions that because you said that you interview the teams, as do we. But I'm curious, what's one of your favorite questions to ask to really drill down on, is this a functioning team?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm sure I have my go-to questions, but I often feel so in the moment and kind of I'm not a here's the 10. I usually write out the 10 questions I'm going to ask everyone, and then I really follow the thread. So my questions are pretty basic that I ask everybody initially. The one that gets the most interesting answers, I think the things that I'm most interested in is, if this team did one thing to be more successful, what would it be? And to hear people with their different level of experience or different vantage point in the company to name that. I recently worked with a team and the majority of them all answered the exact same way. And it was so clear, like, oh, they're more on the same page than they realize. And I've done that with another team and everybody had a different answer. And that just showed me like, oh, the work is a little bit more unclear. We're going to have to peel the onion a little bit to know. And with that first team, once we dealt with that one thing that they all agreed was really holding them back, then we saw a lot of success quickly and we got to peel that onion in a totally different way because that was just the presenting problem. It wasn't like we fixed the one thing that they all needed and they were like, whew, we're ready to go. They were ready to go and they were like, okay, we do want to accelerate, but now that was just the beginning. Like, we need more. We're getting into this. This isn't a one and done like we sort of thought initially, which I was excited about because I've watched that team grow exponentially and really like commit to the process and now see the results.
So when you speak, I can hear the passion in your voice about what you do. And I love that because you sound like me. I love what I do. And what made you get into this business? How did you end up here?
I worked at a university. I did a lot of development and built programs for mentorship. Even when I worked in television before that, I built internship programs on set for some of the big studios. Like, how can we get more students in here? So I think I got my first job from an internship. That was sort of my first passion. Like, how do we help people through mentorship? I didn't call it coaching, but I got asked by a company to just come in and what essentially was coaching their people. It was a company of 4 or 5 people, really small. And that company grew so quickly. They went to 250 and then they got bought. And then I was doing development for their larger company and then they got bought and they had 10 companies, 10 or 11 companies. And then I was doing development on a bigger scale. And then that company got bought by AT&T at the end. So I went from not knowing that I was doing coaching and development, but now I know that's exactly what I was doing and building development programs for people through all those acquisitions and transition. And I just loved it. I think there's a lot of pain for people in rapid change. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people in rapid change. So I know how important it was for me to reframe some of the circumstances that I couldn't control that feel like they're hitting you. And you're like, I built this team. I love this team. I don't want it to change. And so a lot of that has become change management, which I discovered when I got my master's in org development at Pepperdine University's business school. And that really solidified, like, this is my calling. This is my career path. I've been doing this for a long time, but now I clearly see the value it adds. I see the strategy behind it. I see from a scientific research-based background of how this work flows. I think that was the final, like, yep, this is it for me. I love this work.
Yeah, it is interesting that, a lot of times in the beginning, people will think of what we do as like the soft skill thing, but you hit it on the head. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of systems and design thinking behind what we do. And that's what makes it work. If it was just like soft skills and touchy feely, we wouldn't get anywhere, but we can see real results.
Yeah, Cynthia, I think in the beginning I used words like the touchy-feely, the soft skills, and now I see it as a science. I see, oh, it's evidence-based. That's such a key. It's not like, hey, let's try this thing. I think it might have big results for you. It's that I can bring them some stats and some evidence and say, here's a way to grow our thinking in this area. I think it's going to grow you as a leader as well. How do you think this applies to your organization right now? And the leaders I'm working, I don't know what it's like for you, but the leaders I'm working with, after working in this very volatile, uncertain world, like it was hard before, and now it's even harder. It's added a whole nother level of stress, concern, tiredness, maybe even burnout. And so I think being upfront about those challenges as well, it's not, that's where I'm like, this is not fluffy. This is actually really hard work. Beacon development has sort of a funnel of who we work with, because people have to be really ready to engage in this work, because when they're done with it, they do describe it as transformational, but it doesn't mean they enjoy the process. It doesn't mean they're like, yay, Malika and her team are here. Great things are going to happen. They'll probably say that at the end, but during the process, it can be really challenging. It can be confronting with things. We do 360s. The coaching process can be challenging for the people who really want to see that accelerated process and results. So there's a lot of hard work in this, as you well know.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because you were saying how, like, when you started, you used some of that terminology really early in my coaching. I had gone from being an executive vice president in an engineering company. And so my first clients were obviously engineers, but I when I started my business, I had like this tagline. It was it was authenticity for the analytical mind. And I showed it to one of my engineer friends, and I'm like, "Oh, look how cool!" He looked at it and he goes, "What the hell is that? Like, what does that mean to anyone?" And that was, I think, my first lesson in, okay, I've really got to change the language I use, because what I'm using is very engineering. The techniques would work, the language wouldn't.
Yeah, I've ran some programs either with engineers in them or once a program for engineers, and it was a really, really different experience. I learned a lot, but my brain is not coming at it the way theirs is. And the tailoring that needs to be done and the connection was totally different.
Well, the first thing that I did as their new vice president, and it was a very male oriented company, right? So I was the first woman on their leadership team. And we had this big meeting, like everyone together from the organization comes in, and I had been there for about 2 months. So I really wanted to like show off and, be really cool and do something neat at my presentation. So I tried to do a listening exercise, and I'm sure you've probably done them when you have one person give instructions and then everyone in the room ends up with a different result because the way we hear things is different. Well, I did this with engineers. So he had this like image on a piece of paper, and he was supposed to stand up in the room and describe this image in a way that they could write it and they can copy it. But I didn't think that they're engineers. So like I had done this thousands of times, and it would just be a mess. And I would have this perfect lesson to go on. With engineers, he goes, "All right, I want you to place your pencil at 60 degrees at the bottom third of the paper, and I want you to angle up at the," and I went, "Oh my God, this was like a massive fail for my first time." It was perfect. Everyone in the audience had the perfect picture. I'm going, okay, lesson learned. Know your audience.
Yes. I think that's what I love about the work so much. I'm a big risk taker, and I also get bored with things after a while. And so I think that the idea that you'd build a program and it'd be perfect for everybody in the world and any mid-sized organization or something like that is really challenging for me. And there are things that teams can certainly do that will help them. But to really get into the deep work, especially if a team is having a big challenge that you want to help them through, it has to be so tailored for them. It has to be so responsive to the pain that they are feeling at that moment. And they are like, we just cannot see a way through this. And the joy of guiding them through it and coming out stronger on the other side and being able to look back on it and be like, okay, we can do hard things. Our team is resilient. We are not as fragile as maybe we thought we were when we didn't want to address this problem. So I really love how unique and tailored the experience can be with that evidence, science-based sort of informing the whole entire process.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a question about you. What's one area of personal or professional growth that you're currently focused on and hoping to explore further?
There's so many. I need to do what I tell my clients is pick one and really focus on it. And I have shiny object syndrome sometimes too. I have to be super aware of it because I get really excited about the new opportunities. So I like growing, I like building, I like exploring the new possibilities. One possibility that people keep talking to me about is creating scalable, like digital courses that can be downloaded, which would require filming me or others on the team. And I understand that that's the future. And I think that I have a little bit of a block that I need to work on removing there because I feel like, oh, I don't know if that's for us, or I don't know if it works that way. Like, it's so great to be in person with people, but I'm not sure about the digital download, scalable development programs. So I think that that's my next area of growth that I need to consider, because at the end of the day, my North Star is more development for more people. And I say all the time, development is for everyone. It's not just for the CEO. Or the executive team, and development can be very expensive. So we try and find ways every month to offer free open sessions that anyone can join. We send a newsletter out every month with our favorite resources and tools and an assessment you can take, because at the end of the day, not everybody works for a corporation with a bank account that can bring in experts and build special custom programs for them. I think every company should, but that doesn't mean that every company does, right? And what if you're an individual not tied to an organization and you just really want to grow? So it definitely fulfills my dreams and my path to make quality leadership development accessible for all people. But this is an area of growth for me, definitely.
I think the key would be, because I think you and I are very similar, like when I hear you speak. And I think the key is to find that way to make it digital and downloadable, and still keep that personal, that magic that happens when it's face to face or in person. And that, if you can figure that out, and I think if there's anyone who can, it might just be you.
Well, I'll receive those words of wisdom and encouragement from you. Thank you, Cynthia.
So is there anything else you'd like the readers of Authority Magazine to know about you and your business, and anything else you'd like to share before we wind things up?
Yeah, I guess just that if you are interested in personal development or team development, we'd love to connect with you. We're on Instagram at Begin Development. We also have a LinkedIn. You can sign up for our newsletter at begindevelopment.com. Every month we send out this free session we do on Eventbrite that you're welcome to join. I try and pick different sessions each month that people are interested in, that feel very relevant, that are some of the biggest challenges that my clients are having as well. We have a great coaching program. I think coaching is for everyone trying to grow in their career. So I think there's a lot of ways to connect and a lot of opportunities for growth for all people.
And the links for reaching Malika will be they're in the article, and they'll be linked with this video. So you'll be able to reach her. And I'm sure that it would be a worthwhile endeavor reaching out. Thanks for watching the Care to Lead podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos and updates.